Welcome to As the World Churns. I am Danielle Moodie, as always, joined by my fave, Andy Levy. Andy, as it turns out, for a while, I have been going back and forth about whether or not a majority of this country is lost, right? Like, we're just never going to get them back. And I still believe this, but the New York Times has solidified it with some pictures that allow those that pictures resonate more than words to really see, which is that they have posted a interactive map. The Democrats' problems run deep nearly everywhere. This is where voters shifted toward Trump in each of the last three elections. And just imagine that it is a map of the United States with all of these red arrows going all over the country, going every single where, not just in the red districts, but or in the red states, but literally all across the country. And that the article and the infographics go as far to say that even when Donald Trump lost the 2020 elections, he was still gaining voters, and that Republicans have consistently been gaining voters over these last three elections, where in fact, yes, where in fact Democrats are only building up voters in where wealthy, highly educated enclaves, which, if you've seen America lately, is in a lot of places. Democrats, I guess I could have shortened this if you were using AI and you asked for a shorter title and something punchier. It would say, Democrats seemed fucked in 2026. What say you, America?
Am I speaking for America here?
Yes, Andy. You
Okay.
always do.
I love to speak for America. Yeah, this is just really, really bad. It's never a good sign when it says Democrats are gaining ground in a small sliver of the best educated enclaves. Enclave is not a word you want for where you're gaining ground with voters.
No,
uh, because an enclave is generally
very
kind of
small.
small and generally surrounded by the enemy, or however you want to phrase it. So never a good sign when you're seeing that word used. I mean, there was a stat in that Times report that said Trump increased the Republican Party's share of the presidential vote in each election he's been on the ballot in close to half the counties in America. And boy, that's just not good. Yes, I know that obviously places like, New York City, Los Angeles, Boston, Chicago, a lot of other big cities are majority Democrat. And so it's easy to say, yeah, sure, he's increasing the Republican vote, but it's in small areas. The thing is, you get enough small areas and they start to outweigh the big
Mhm.
cities. And that's what we're seeing here. I mean, that's even setting aside the idiocy of the electoral college, because if we're talking about congressional elections, that's a really, really bad sign that all these counties whose elected representatives have the same amount of power as the elected representatives from places with larger populations do. Boy, it's such a bad trend. 435 counties voted more Democratic in 2024 than in 2012. 2,678 counties became more Republican. That's, roughly six times as many counties going towards the Republicans than towards the Democrats. And it's also by a larger margin. It's by 13%. They're becoming more Republican, whereas the Democrats in the counties they improved by 8.8%. So it's six times the counties.
Mhm.
It's a much bigger gain, a much bigger margin of voters switching, and it is one of these things where you read it and it's like, okay, let me keep going. I'll get to the good news. And suddenly I got to the part where it just started talking about sources and methodology in very small letters at the end. Uh, it's like there was no good news. And look, it's one study and it's not everything. And the Democrats have continued to do well in the midterms, and all this stuff is potentially reversible, but man, it is rough to read.
I mean, it's rough to read, and also, like, it begs the question of, well, so we know, right? Like this map again is just a visual representation of what we've been talking about on this show and on other, our former show for years at this point, right? That as Trumpism continued to grow and gain ground in areas and with communities, Black men, Latino men, picking off the working class, that where were Democrats and what was the messaging? Because the messaging just couldn't be, we're not Donald Trump. If Donald Trump is appealing to people, right? You needed to offer another narrative. Now, for people like ourselves, I think that it was, for us, it's just like, well, how could you not see the other narrative? You have somebody who is embracing autocracy, believes in fascism, believes, that white people are the most aggrieved, believe that marginalized people deserve whatever pain comes their way just by virtue of their birth. Like that, there's an easy story to tell here as to why Donald Trump isn't the choice for an America moving forward. And America that, by the way, reminder, voted for a Black man twice, right? So that there are still, there are those people that are there. Barack Obama had a compelling story, one that
Right.
America wanted to connect with, one that was about, yes, we can be better. We can do these things. We can build community. We can move forward. And so, again, you think to yourself, well, then, Andy, Democrats must have gotten this message. So what are they doing? Well, they did get the message, and what they're doing, according to the Washington Post, and this title, hold on to your hats, folks. It says Democratic troubles revive debate over left wing buzzwords. From quote, intersectionality to quote, equity, many say jargon is alienating key voters, but progressives say inclusive language is vital now. So while the entire country is going red, while Trumpism is gaining ground, Democrats are arguing over words. And I have a lot of thoughts and issues with that. What say you?
I have a lot of thoughts and issues with it too, but to some extent, I sort of agree with it. And where I agree with it is I think there are different ways to say the same thing. And where I don't agree with it is there are times when centrists, or, call them whatever you want, what they're more concerned about is not the language, but the point being made, or the rights of people that sort of undergird the language. For example, they keep complaining about words like Latinx and pregnant people, which first of all are terms that were barely ever used by anybody. So to act like those are the big problems is ridiculous to me. But again, I have no problem with not saying pregnant people. I think it's okay to just say women. And yes, trans men count as pregnant people. I have no problem with that. But let's face it, the majority of pregnant people are cis women. And so I don't think it's a big deal to say women and to not say pregnant people, as long as you are cognizant of the fact and you are willing to stand up for the fact that there are people who become pregnant who do not identify as women. And and you're not throwing them under the bus. Like that's where I think the difference is. I think too much of this debate about language, particularly from the centrist point of view, is not so much about the language, but it's about the people they want to throw under the bus, or the people they want to,
Yep.
just ignore and pretend don't exist.
Yep.
So I do think there are ways of being more plain spoken. I think Tim Walz was a perfect example of this before the consultants, you know, got to him. And I think the fact that he went out there and called people weird and did whatever, but at the same time was so very clearly an inclusive person in terms of queer people, trans people, black people, brown people, whatever. Like Tim Walz is a guy, like if he doesn't use the academic word, fine. And yeah, probably better. I think there is sometimes a tendency among Democrats to go for the academic word when they don't have to. And so again, my feeling on this is I don't really care what word you use for something like this, as long as your heart is in the right place and you're looking at protecting everyone. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of times, to repeat myself, a lot of times the people who have problems with the language actually have problems
With
with
the
the
people.
people that
Mhm.
the language is meant to represent. And that's where I have to say, I shut up. I'm not interested in what you have to say anymore.
Agreed. Agreed.